Welcome, everyone, to the Find Me the Money podcast. I am so excited today to have Lacey Langford with us. She's a financial coach, a veteran, and a military spouse who changes people's mindset from being fearful of money to having control and confidence with it. Military and money are her jams. She's an accredited financial counselor with over 15 years of financial planning, counseling, and coaching experience. Lacey is the founder and the CEO of the Military Money Show, a podcast dedicated to the military community with personal finance. And she has MilMoneyCon, a national conference and community for financial professionals united by military service. Lacey's also the founder of LaceyLangford.com, a personal finance blog and coaching practice specializing in the unique world of the U.S. military. And today we are talking about military wives and divorce. So a little bit of a specialized topic. And I love starting out, Lacey, with where can people find you? Because I don't want them to have to wait until the end to know where to find you.
Yes, LaceyLangford.com is a great place to start. It has all of my social handles. It has the podcast. So LaceyLangford.com is the good spot.
I love it. Well, in preparation for our interview, I did a little bit of research. And I found out that last year there were over 700,000 U.S. military spouses. And I also found, and this is going to be no surprise to you, that career military people have divorce rates that are higher than any other profession in the U.S. Contributing to that high divorce rate, I found online were things like moving a lot, the deployments, PTSD, and infidelity. So does my research, match with your experience in this field?
Yes, I didn't know that number of military spouses. That's an impressive number, but I believe that. And those reasons all, yes, do factor into divorce. But I think, PTSD leads to a lot of poor decision making, which can mean infidelity, making bad financial choices, maybe hiding money, overspending, taking that type of stuff. So I feel like there is some stressors that PTSD amplifies or causes maybe that wouldn't have been there if there wasn't PTSD involved.
Certainly. When I think of military, I think of the deployments as being incredibly, incredibly stressful. It seems to me that the person who's deployed would feel like I'm being ripped away from my family. I'm doing all this work. I'm the one sacrificing for the family. While the spouse who's left behind with the kids thinks I'm here doing it all for the family and taking care of the kids on my own. And I think for both of them, it's probably really, really stressful.
Yes, I like to call that the I deserve it game, which is a losing game. There's really no winner in that one, especially as it comes to your relationship, but also with money. That ends up why people spend a lot of money. Like, well, I've been deployed. I've been sacrificing. I've been away from the kids and you. I deserve a new car when I get back. Same thing with the military wife. Well, you've been gone. I've been taking care of the kids. I've basically been a single mother. I don't have a social life. I don't have my own identity. I deserve to go on a girl's massive trip to Bali or something like that. That is a huge expense and maybe is not a united front in coming back and working on your relationship and the family and stuff like that. So it's really not a good mentality to get into.
It would seem to me that it would be really important to have some sort of classes or counseling before marriage if you're involved with a military spouse. So you could talk about, hey, we might have a deployment. How would we manage that? What would the parameters be? What would be the most difficult parts of it, right?
Yes, I think so. Having those conversations, it's almost what they call like wargaming. It's like, what would happen or what would we do if XYZ happened? And that's great going to counseling, but at a minimum, you should be looking at scenarios that unfortunately you probably have seen peers go through. Say, well, this couple we are friends with, he cheated on her. What would we do in that situation? Or what would you have done if you were in that situation? Would you have cheated? Would you have gotten out of there? Or, talk about that. If I did this to you, how would you expect me to act? Like, I would be very hurt. That's a betrayal of trust. What's it going to be like when I haven't had a partner for a year or somebody in my life for 6 months? I'm lonely. How are we going to cope with loneliness? I'm trying to be the disciplined person and the fun mom. How can, we juggle you coming back and melding back into my parenting style that I've been doing this entire time that you're gone. So I think talking with a counselor or talking through those scenarios with each other and wargaming, like, what are we going to do? How will we handle this situation is really helpful because, one, if you get in that situation, you automatically know, like, hey, we've discussed this. This isn't foreign to me. Like, I, really need to think about this could be a huge trap. This could be a problem later for us. So it's going to help you make smart decisions in that moment. But then in the aftermath, like if a poor decision was made or hurt or anger or whatever the emotions are involved, that discussion or the result of it is going to be a little bit better, the communication style, if you've already walked through that when it wasn't a heated or, crazy emotional state.
Do you think people go into military marriages unprepared for the realities of it?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
I think if you grew up in a military family or have siblings or, somebody that has lived that life, it's not as foreign to you. But if you don't know anybody that ever served, and especially during combat times, which is a whole different ballgame, you're dealing with things that are very scary. There are many military wives that, turning on the news is a trigger, because you just don't know what you're going to see. And if it's in the region that that your husband's at, like that's a very scary factor. And so if you've never talked with somebody that's been through that, like how they cope with living day to day, taking care of your kids, working, keeping your sanity with balancing, like your husband could be killed at any time. That's a really hard world to navigate. Plus, it's like managing your finances, managing your personal health, like all of these things go into being a military wife that if you don't know somebody else or have a little bit of experience with that, it can be like, wow, this is a lot. It's like drinking through a fire hose, not to mention all the other things that come with that, moving, the transitions, trying to get a job, being underemployed, finding new friends, because you want to have some type of social network to help you out because you're most likely going to be away from family. So it is a lot to intake if you haven't walked that before.
Well, it seems to me, I hate to play into stereotypes that are out there, but I think especially for younger women, there are like stars in the eyes of I'm marrying a military man, or especially if it's an officer, I'm marrying a military officer, and it seems glamorous and things like that. And I think that there may be a tendency to downplay how difficult it really is.
Oh, yes. I think that is with age, just not being great with money. You don't have really great life experiences. You probably don't have a lot of experience with a relationship, a marriage, or a long-term. You might have like a boyfriend in high school or something like that. But often military spouses come in and they're 17 years old. I've met a 16-year-old. And so you could be really young again, but there's also military spouses that are in their 40s, or 50s. So it's all ages. But I think when you're younger, that there is this thought, like, I'm marrying a military guy who looks really hot in his uniform. Like, this is great. Like, he's got a steady career and he has discipline. He is in really great shape, but he's going to actually be gone for the next 2 weeks in the field, and you're not really going to get to talk to him. He's going to come home. He's going to be super exhausted. Everything is going to be dirty. Your washer is going to be put to the test. They're going to be getting up really early and coming home really late. They could ask to work weekends. You could be asked short notice for them to leave. I think my husband and I had big plans one time, and we found out he needed to backfill somebody, that there was an emergency. And so he was leaving like in the next 2 days for 2 months. And it was like,
wow.
We had no plan for that. We actually had personal plans, like we were going to go on a trip, and so there's wrenches that can be thrown in your plan, and thinking like it's going to be, okay, he might go on a deployment, but we're going to get really great notice on that, and we'll plan and we'll prepare, or, we're going to move, but we're going to be really prepared for that as well. And the reality of it is, nothing really can prepare you for those situations completely. And oftentimes they are short notice, or they don't go down as planned. And that can be difficult.
Okay, so let's get into the money issues, since Find Me the Money is about focusing on the money. Do you see the financial effects of divorce on military wives being equally as problematic as they are in general, which is that in general, women are at much greater risk of poverty after divorce than men are.
Oh, absolutely. I know it applies to everybody, but for military spouses, it is very difficult to have a full-time career and be a military wife because you are moving a lot, starting over. So that can be very difficult. And, they're gone a lot. So if you have children, often you are staying home with the children. The childcare is expensive, all those things that play into it. But I think there's not as much talk as there should be about as soon as you become a military spouse, you should be planning for your own financial future because you never know what's going to happen. One, it's serious business. Death is a reality of the world, especially if you are married to a service member that is in combat arms. The reality of what they do is sobering and sombering. So you should always be planning for what if I'm no longer a military spouse? Mm-hmm. What if I'm not married to this person anymore? How am I going to plan my retirement? Do I have a retirement savings account? You might not work for an employer. You might not work for an employer that offers a plan, but you can have an individual retirement account or an IRA and be saving for your financial future. Doing things like that, not spending all your money, making sure that you all have savings is really important. The combination of one, protecting your financial future and having your own retirement account, I think, is prevention and it's peace of mind. And it's also for the service member to know, like, hey, if this goes south, I have my future is taken care of. I'm not just waiting on a military retirement because a service member might not retire from the military. They might separate and not receive a retirement. Mm-hmm. So there's all these things to think about. And I think you should be thinking about that day one, not waiting like, things aren't going really well in our marriage. That's the bad time to start thinking about your financial future. You should be thinking about it day one in any marriage, for that matter, but especially in a military marriage, because if a service member is killed in action or while they're on duty, yes, there is insurance, there are financial benefits that you'll receive, but it might not be enough for the quality of life that you're used to. So I think preparing will help avoid the poverty situation if it does come to divorce. Not to mention you are practicing those habits and understand your finances and how to manage them on your own. So that's not a threat to you. If it's like, oh, well, you're going to not have enough money or, you don't know how to do these things. No, that doesn't work then.
I always recommend that married people have bank accounts that are only in their own name, a credit card only in their own name. And I always say for stay-at-home moms, that's especially important because if you ever do separate from your spouse, you need to have some money in a bank account that only you can touch. I've seen too many divorces where they separate and someone cleans out that bank account and the stay-at-home mom has no source of income whatsoever and now has no money to pay rent, to put food on the table. And I think of military wives being very often stay-at-home moms and very much in a situation like stay-at-home moms, even if they do work, where there are some intricacies with getting the military benefits, getting, support payments and things like that might be a little bit more difficult. And so having that separate account is your protection. And
I do think that is helpful. And it's, again, prevention for everybody to understand. Like, mm-hmm. We both have our own accounts and that's already set up. And that I'm putting maybe we're each putting 10% or we each put in, $100 each month into these accounts or $300, whatever it is. So it's clear for everybody, but I think it's peace of mind. But it also, I think in situations where military wives sometimes are at a disadvantage, it makes it clear that I do have my own ground to stand on.
Well, let's get into some specific questions that I see in some of the divorce support groups online. I find that military wives, if they're getting divorced, don't necessarily know what their rights are and don't know how they're going to receive benefits and stuff like that. So I want to go through a few of some of the specific things that are going to apply to military wives who are getting divorced. What is the Uniformed Services Former Spouses Protection Act, USFSPA?
Yes, that is a law that gives states the rights to distribute military retirements in a divorce. It doesn't say how much, but it basically says if a judge says that this military wife gets half of a service member's retirement pay, that gives the state the right to do that. So it's good that protection that was put in place for military spouses, because that's what was happening. A lot of people, married 20 years and get out and divorce their wife, and they weren't getting any of that money that a lot of times stay-at-home moms don't have the same earning power as their spouse. And so that provides a protection for them so the state can divvy it up.
So the first important thing to know is that if your spouse will be retiring from the military, has retired from the military, they're going to get a pension, and you most likely have a right to receive a part of that, right? This doesn't necessarily say how much you will receive, but it at least is giving you the right to receive that.
Yes, the right to receive it. And then there's some rules that go along with that. You can't just, automatically, have been married 1 year to somebody that served 30 years and you get half of their retirement. That's not going to happen.
Right. But what I want listeners to understand is, in some divorces, probably in too many divorces, my husband says he wants me to leave his pension alone. He doesn't want me touching his retirement. I'm going to back off of that and leave it alone. You are legally entitled to part of his retirement, especially if you were in a long-term marriage with him and if you don't have a prenup. If it's the typical marriage, typical long-term marriage, you have a right to part of that retirement. And I want you to think very carefully about exercising that right, especially if you don't have a retirement account of your own, if you haven't been working. That it can be a very significant benefit. And when you went into this marriage, this partnership, you agreed to build for your financial future together. And so I'm going to encourage our listeners to pursue that pursue what they are legally entitled to get in that regard.
Yes, I think, if you're going through a divorce, that is a very emotional state for you. You're probably trying as best you can to hold everything together, but you need a neutral third party to give you advice. If you're thinking like, I don't want to fight this, it also could be a confidence thing, maybe not having as much work experience and dealing with legal people or financial people, that not to be scared of that, having a conversation with somebody else, because you don't know what you don't know. And you thinking, well, I wouldn't get that much money, or because you're listening to hearsay. You're not listening to the person that does that on a day-to-day basis and thinking, well, I'm not going to ask for that money because he's the one that actually served. Right. That's fine if that's what you currently think, but go talk to somebody that's a professional that can give you a full perspective and a complete understanding of what that looks like in the future for you. If that's the choice that you make, this is, X, Y, Z, what is going to happen? And these are potential possibilities that could happen, can help you make a more informed decision and it not be so emotional. Having somebody that is not involved in the situation give it to you straight from a calm perspective.
Cool. So there are some rules regarding receiving benefits in the divorce, and they've got some fancy numbers to them. Can you just run through what these rules are and how they're going to be used in the divorce?
Yeah, so the first one is the 20-20-20 rule. And it says that basically if you want to receive the benefits, so the benefits, not just the retirement pay, which is huge, is also having access to medical care, TRICARE, also your commissary and exchange privileges. So those are the grocery store and the department store on a military installation. And those are pretty big. A lot of people do want to receive those benefits, especially as it relates to medical benefits. So to receive those, you have to meet some requirements, is that you have to be married for at least 20 years. The spouse has to have served 20 years of credible retirement pay. And then your marriage has to overlap with their military service for 20 years in order to receive a division of that retirement pay and get the benefit of TRICARE, the commissary, and exchange. The other rule is the 20-20-15 rule. So same thing, have to be married at least 20 years. The service member has to have served 20 years, and the marriage has to overlap for 15 years of his military service. And that's for you to still receive TRICARE benefits. And depending on the outcome, you might have to pay a little bit of it, but you're still eligible to receive that benefit. And then the last one is the 10-10 rule. And this is more about who's going to pay the bill. So for example, if you, in the division in your divorce, you are getting half of his retirement pay each month, The 10-10 rule gives you the choice that either it comes straight from the Department of Defense, from his MyPay account, or he pays you. So, if you have a nasty divorce, you don't necessarily maybe trust him to give you the money on time. You have the benefit if you've been married for 10 years and you receive that benefit, that the DOD can pay you instead of it coming from the service member. So, it comes right off the top. So there's not a chance of, maybe he puts in a lot of allotments to reduce his pay. There's potential to cause headache for you. So that getting it directly from the military might be the better way.
Okay, what about VA disability benefits? I get a lot of questions about, I'm going to be receiving child support from him or spousal support, but he's only getting disability and he's saying I can't touch that. How does all of that work?
So the VA disability is for service-connected injury or ailments, and they're receiving that tax-free each month from the VA. And it is not an asset that you could get half of. So that's sometimes a misconception, is that spouses think, well, if we divorce, I'm going to get half of his retirement pay and I'm going to get half of his disability. No, you won't get a dime of his disability. You might get half of his retirement pay, but not the disability. Now, the disability goes into the income calculation for alimony and child support.
So just to be clear, you can't outright just take half of it because you are married. However, if you are calculating child support or spousal support that they may owe you, that disability benefit is going to go into the calculation of the total income that they're making. So it is going to be factored in. So you can't just swipe that money off the top, but it is going to be factored in. So when you're told, you can't touch my disability, it's as if it doesn't exist. That's not really true. And it's really important, I think, when you're getting divorced and you're a military wife, to make sure that you retain a divorce attorney who is well-versed in military divorces so that they aren't leading you astray or giving you the wrong advice on things like this.
Oh, definitely. Somebody that has served in the military and is a divorce attorney is probably the better way to go. Or somebody that is in a military town, that's the predominantly who all their clients are, is the military, is the smarter way to go, because they're going to understand the life that you live.
As we wrap up today, tell us some of the resources that are available to service members and their spouses to help them if they have marital problems or they are heading towards divorce.
Okay, so first off, a lot of the military branches do marital retreats. So if you're like, this isn't going real great, especially after a deployment, long separation, sometimes people choose to be separated. You can do one of these retreats. Often they're announced through the chaplain's office or through your unit. So if you see one of those coming up, take it, because often they are paying for you to go do those, and it's free. They often provide childcare. I think actually all the time they provide childcare. So it's a great way for you to get a little vacation away and get to talk about your marriage. If you are a military wife and thinking it's happening, there are free financial counselors on most every military installation, or you can get one through Military OneSource. I would take advantage of being able to go and sit down and talk with somebody there. Usually the legal service offices or JAG offices on military installations will give a list of divorce attorneys in the local area that maybe have, they're not going to recommend anybody, but they are going to have a list for you to go off of, and they can let you know maybe some of the legal things to know or beware of if you are going through divorce.
That's awesome. So besides listening to you on the Military Money Show, where can people access your offerings and your coaching?
Yes, LaceyLangford.com work with me page has all the ways that you can work with me or connect with me too.
And of course, we will put it in the show notes. Thank you everyone for listening today, and to all you military wives out there. I hope this was a wonderful resource for you. If you have more questions about how things might go down with the money and a divorce, please reach out to Lacey. She's an absolute expert in the area of money for military people. Thanks, Lacey.
Thanks for having me.